45, but here we go. We're live, man.
Sweet. I love it.
So yeah, man, just thank you so much for joining, man, and being here.
Yeah.
You know, I was really looking forward to it, you know, just because, you know, you being a brother of Justin, you know, I really look up to Justin, and he talks so highly of you, man. So I'm just really so privileged to have you on the show, man. So
Dude, I'm honored, man. What a way to start the day. This is great.
it is, man. Have you ever done any podcasts before?
No, I actually thought about doing some though back in the day. I actually bought like all the equipment and the microphones and stuff. And
No way.
I was like, yeah, I totally was into it. I did some, in my journey of trying to figure out what to do with my life, I was, for a while there, I was making some YouTube videos
Yeah.
about personal finance and all that good stuff. And just to try it and see what it was all about. But yeah, I just found it was super draining. I got the
Oh
the
wow, you got the
special.
mic and everything
Yeah.
too, man. It is, bro. It is like to do the YouTube thing, and that's why I'm not like on social media and stuff. Like when you look,
Oh,
talk to the phone and stuff, and it is super draining, man. And
it's super draining.
I'm more of like a real life person. I don't know. I have such a tough time talking and speaking to a computer screen. It's very tough. It's very tough, man. And even doing
Yeah.
these, man, even doing like the Zoom podcast, like I really like it, but
Yeah.
I'm more of a face to face person, man.
No, respect for even doing this stuff. This is like, yeah. Are you more of like an introverted person, you think?
Totally, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even you know what? I went to, and even with the COVID stuff going on, my brother invited me to go to watch the UFC fights downtown Kelowna on Saturday,
Oh, yeah.
and I haven't been out in like a social setting in since last year sometime. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people around, and I was just like, especially you know like when people are intoxicated and you know being in that type of environment. I used to be in that environment all the time, but nowadays it's like I just felt so out of place, man. So out of
I
place.
know. It's a heavy weight, especially if you're like, yeah, introverted type person. I'm total introvert. Like I just love uh just doing stuff solo. I found that like pretty early on. I was like, yeah, it's kind of nice just being on my own. And like I love being with people, but it does take energy. It takes a certain amount of energy
It does.
to be with people.
And
So
you're a family man. You're a family man.
yeah,
You know, I'm not a family man, and I still like my alone time a lot more than the average person. But
that's been like having kids is like it's like like a big rig truck. You have the first one and you find that gear. You're like, okay, we can do this. It's a little harder, we can do it. And then each kid that comes along, you just got to find that next gear. And
yeah.
then you know
So how
by the
many
grace
kids do you
of
have?
God, I got 3.
Yeah, three. That's right. Okay, so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
and Justin have three. That's right.
yeah.
What's it like being a father, man?
It's so much fun. It's so much fun. It really is. It all depends on your perspective. Like a lot of people aren't, they're pretty, yeah, pretty fearful of having kids. Pretty, it's a huge task. It's really a life of serving others. It to have like, a good family unit as a dad. Like the number one thing to be successful as a dad is to learn how to serve your family.
Mm.
And if you can if you can figure that out and how to do that on like a consistent basis, like the blessings are huge.
Right.
Like um it's that I was mentioned before, like I believe in God, and I believe that there's something after this life. And so when you pour into your kids like that, it's like really the only thing in this life, one of the only things that will carry on into eternity, or at least I believe, when you're poured into your kids as a dad and your family. And so yeah, it's intense, but like there's some amazing moments just to see your kids, like when you're building this podcast or whatever you're building, like when you pour yourself into something and then you see any sort of fruit, any sort of like blooms on the branches or any sort of leaves sprouting, you're like, whoa,
Right.
it's like
Right.
the best feeling. So it's very similar with kids, very similar. And the other thing that kids do is they will reveal some crazy stuff about you that you didn't know. Like
Right. Yeah. Tell me about that, man. What
I
they
thought
reveal about you?
I thought that when I was going into having kids, I thought, "Yeah, I'm pretty, I'm pretty, good at serving people. I don't think about myself that often or whatever." And I was like, okay. But then it's like, it's like another level. So basically, yeah. And then, in my relationship with God, he has a sense of humor on how he like refines me and like makes me into who he would have me to be. So, I was telling you about like the whole burnout thing and the mental health stuff and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
trying to get through all that.
And I want to hear about that, man. I want to hear like
Yeah,
how you got
yeah, totally.
of burning out.
Yeah. So kids will like, so when you get married, you go from being single to being serving one other person.
Right.
And that's a definite challenge. Like a whole bunch of different things are revealed about yourself. And you realize like, whoa, I need to change some stuff to be successful. Like I could keep going in the way I was going, but to have a successful marriage, which, I think everybody would want, like whether it be business or whatever, to have like a successful business, you can't keep doing what you were doing before you didn't have a business. Like
That's
you
right.
have to change to have a good business. So same with marriage. And so figure that out. It's like, okay, found that gear. And then once the first kids come along, then you find that next gear and it's like, okay, I can't, basically you're just, when it comes to having kids and family, you just start realizing like, okay, I got to eliminate certain things to be a successful dad and to have a successful family, like
Totally.
a peaceful home, happy kids, a happy wife. So some of the things I learned I had to give up was just time spent on like YouTube, uh, time spent just for myself. Like I can't do 5-hour rounds of golf anymore.
Yeah.
um, like it costs me, like everything that I do now I realize has a much higher price. So if I stay up late because I just wanted some alone time or just wanted to chill or whatever, which is I've done so many times and paid for it so dearly, that's one thing I just seem to not be able to learn. But if I go stay up late, I get totally paid for it because the kids are up at 6:30, 7:30 every day.
Done.
Regardless of what time you went to bed, they need you to survive the next morning.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to get up because you love your kids, but then you're paying for it the whole day. So learning how to be disciplined with my sleep, learning how to be disciplined to like when I find time to exercise. Because like growing up, I just loved going to the gym. Like
Yeah.
I would go to the gym for like 2, sometimes 3 hours, just go lift weights and then just like play basketball like for an afternoon. That's all we would do. It was super fun. But now it's just different. I would always joke with my dad too, like, um, oh dad, like why don't you just take some time to go to the gym? Why don't you go work out? Like he's like, you just wait. So you have kids, you'll figure it out like why you don't have that same energy.
Such a
Um,
sacrifice, man. Oh,
yeah, but it's like such freedom though too. Like people can see it as like, oh, I have to give up some other things, but the trade-off is awesome. Like the the downside is so minimal and the ups, I look at everything like that, like what's the upside to this, what's the downside, and the downside is so minimal, and the upside is so huge that the trade-off becomes like it's a no-brainer. um,
what's like one characteristic that your kids have developed from you where you see now like in full effect?
oh man, I could say some good and some bad. So I'll say bad that they picked up from me is probably um, just yeah. I think a big one is just how maybe they treat each other. Like sometimes, um, just how they speak to each other is just not necessarily obviously not what I would have them how I would have them speak to each other, but not how God would have them speak to each other, and how it's not how like I'll say some stuff sometimes I'm like, oh man. I think the Bible talks about, there's this passage in the Bible that talks about taming the tongue. and being careful with what you say.
Mm.
And for me, it's like sometimes I'll say things that I really shouldn't. I'm like, ah. And so yeah, they kind of, I think that's one thing they've maybe picked up from me is just how they speak to each other. Cause kids are sponges. It's crazy.
Totally sponges. But
And
sometimes they slip out, man. It's kind of hard to control those things, you know.
I know.
And then they'll
You
be
say,
like, "What does that word mean?"
yeah, exactly. So you say one thing and they'll remember. Like they have memories like a trap. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So, but the good though is just seeing them. Like there's so much good. I would say the good so far outweighs the like the harder things or the things that I'm not super proud of, which I'm so thankful for. Um, like just their, yeah, like they're really learning on how to be obedient. Like that's one thing my wife and I've really instilled in our kids is obedience, and especially between the ages of like 0 and 5 years old, because it's such a time where they're so malleable. And basically, after the ages of 5 or 6, the kid is basically set. Like they learned, okay, can I respect my dad? Can I respect my mom?
yeah,
How is like the hierarchy in the family? What can I get away with? Like so much is being programmed into the kid's brain
right.
between 0 and 5, and and um and so I'm just so thankful to see that, you know, a lot of what like we would desire for our kids, and especially like with obedience and stuff, learning how to, um because we tell them like once they get to the certain age, like we're not going to be there to tell them what to do anymore. Like they're going to have to make their own decisions and choose, whether to pursue a walk with God or not. Like they're going to have to answer for their own decisions later on in life. And so I think the thing that just gives me the most joy is to see them, um, like heading in the direction of wanting to do like the right things. And like just the other day, it was really cool. Forrest, our oldest, had a soccer camp. It was his first soccer camp,
Yeah,
and he is just such a sensitive kid. Like he's got such a great heart. And basically one of the rules was they go from where they get checked in to down the street to a soccer field to do their practice. And when they got there, one of the leaders told me after, he's like, we saw Forrest and he was just like basically face down, like on his back or whatever, just weeping, just crying. And it's like, well, what happened? Like, did you get hurt? And he's like, no, I went across the road without my coach, and he knew that he shouldn't have done that.
oh wow.
And it was like, man, to hear stories like that is just like, it's like, man, it makes me want to cry. It's like, oh, that's like so cool that he has such a like a sensitive heart to do what he knows is right, you know.
Yeah, that just to me it proves you guys are doing a pretty good job.
Oh, thanks, man.
Pretty cool, man. That is really
Yeah,
that would make me want to cry almost.
yeah, like, oh, it's super powerful. So I'd say, yeah, just seeing the fruit of because it does, like, it takes a lot. Like so much, I'm learning that so much recently, is like so much of what you do has a delayed effect,
Right.
you know. Like I don't know if you've heard of the author James Clear.
No, I haven't. I don't think so.
He wrote this book called Atomic Habits, and I
Oh,
follow him on.
I have heard of that book though.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
awesome book.
Atomic.
And basically, like he's got some really good ideas about habits and how to form like systems in your life to make habits easier to do and that sort of thing.
Right.
um, he talks about how everything that you do is basically a delay. Like you're not going to see the fruit of these things till later.
Mhm.
And so often, like in business and stuff, people, I'm myself included, I'll do something, it's like, oh, I didn't see results right away, so it must not be working,
Right.
or I did something wrong or whatever. But I'm learning more and more that so many things in life take time. And it's cool to see with our kids how you don't really see what you're doing when you're up at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, changing diapers and walking with a screaming baby.
Right.
You don't really see what you're doing in the moment, but it's really cool to see like fruits being starting to the work starting to bear fruit in the
Yeah.
future.
the seeds being planted. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it's just super encouraging.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And when it comes to like you talking about like this burnout thing, like do you find that when you're balancing work life, relationship, social life, how do you balance that to not reach that burnout point, I guess?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. One thing I'm starting to get really good at is saying no. So I say no a lot. Like I'm the type of person where like my natural instinct is I want to please people, and if I can't please someone, I feel terrible.
Right.
Like if whether it be Justin or whoever, it's like, hey, let's go do this thing. Like, let's get together with a bunch of people, and I'm just like, oh, I can't. Like, I'm learning slowly learning that I don't need to feel bad about saying no.
Right.
And I just know that, okay, for me to survive, I need to, I have to say no. So the way I didn't balance it before. Like basically real quick, I started in the anime. Basically I've been feeling crappy ever since I started doing animation. So that was my career basically
Yeah,
before.
that's right. That's what you were telling me before. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just started doing animation, and basically ever since then, I just haven't felt like just with tons of energy. I've always kind of been tired. I've always just been like, oh, I'm just like drained all the time. And from the start, it's just like, well, I was an employee. I just love to please people, and I wanted to achieve success. Like I wanted to do really, really well. So I would just bust my butt. And excuse me, it would work. Like I did it, and I work super, super hard, and I eventually got my dream job working on big feature animation films and all that.
Awesome.
Um, but then just over time, like I never took care of myself. I was always saying yes and yes and yes. Um, so it was kind of a culmination. So I was working for this one studio. I wanted to move over to feature animation. So I took 4 months off, uh, went to the library, uh, learned about how to do 3D animation and use these programs, like kind of self-taught. And it was like the most stressful, frustrating time because I didn't know if I'd get a job. I didn't know what was ahead, and wasn't really much income at that point. I was married. We had our 1 year old at that point, and so I'd go to the library, work, have a good cry almost every day because I was just like so stressed, and I was just like some of the days I was trying to learn this program, it was so frustrating. Like I couldn't figure out like how to make, because I knew what I wanted to see, but I just couldn't use the tool to get there. So
Right.
anyways, so this was after working. Yeah, this was after working super hard in the first sort of stage of the career. Did this kind of big shift, and then went right into feature films, which is a whole other ball game because they have what's called crunch time.
Okay.
So you do basically a 6 month contract. So for the first 4 to 5 months, you'd work like 9 hours a day, 9 to 6 every day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I wanted to please people and do really well, so I was busting my butt trying to do as well as I could. And the stress just kept building, and the lack of self-care just kept building and building and building. And eventually I got to so basically between contracts, most people take a month or two off to recharge because you can't just keep working straight through. It's too intense.
Right.
So after the first contract, they said, oh, we have another job coming up, and I wanted to stay there, or so I thought, because it was like, oh yeah, this is super good thing, I thought. And I just jumped into the next contract right away, which was, in hindsight, super dumb, health wise. And eventually at the end of the second crunch time, I started feeling a certain way that I'd never felt before. Like I literally had no gas in the tank. Like I was running on fumes. Like I had no energy. I just couldn't. I've never felt like that before in my life. Like I've always been super strong, could always do whatever I set my mind to, physically, mentally.
Yeah.
I was always healthy, never any issues, never health issues. Could play sports as long for all day long. Like it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started feeling this way, and I was like, whoa, this isn't good. So I remember one day I stood up at my desk, like it was just like we're sitting here. I stood up, and I remember feeling like I felt like my brain was melting into my body, and I felt like my whole body was just wanted to like just like shoot out of my body. Like it was weird. All my internal organs just wanted to like just
Wow.
get out. It was just I can't describe it. It was the most horrible feeling you could possibly experience. And
Mm.
um and I was like, whoa, that's new. Never felt that before. And so I basically from then on I told them, okay, I gotta go home. I feel weird. They're like, okay. And then I would have, and then I would have a couple more of those, what I know now to be panic attacks,
Right.
um, a couple more throughout that period, and then basically quit my job because I couldn't keep going in 2000, end of 2015. Um,
Wow.
and so from 2015 to 2000, summer of 2018, I didn't know what was going on. So I was basically homebound, like no clue what was going on. I tried everything, went to every single doctor, um, tried every sort of test or whatever. It was so hard, like to even get to the appointments because you felt like you were gonna die. Like you didn't know, like, am I gonna die on the way or what? Like, what's going on? So, um, so ended up trying to figure out, and then eventually, like it was definitely the hardest 3 years of my life. Like married, we had a kid, then my second daughter was just born,
Mm.
um, and thankfully, like through that time, I had been pretty interested in finance and investing,
Yeah.
and I had some investments that did pretty well, and so we lived off that for like 3 years, and then some family helped a little bit too, which was nice. Um, so like no income for like 4 years, three
Wow.
and a half years, 4 years, which was like my worst nightmare come true. Because before that point, like I had always feared not like making my dad proud, not having enough, not like being out on the street, not having enough money. Like that's always been a huge fear of mine.
Yeah.
And I think this was kind of a way for God to do some work in me to be like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna be a way better provider for your family and for you than you ever could be. And that was a huge learning curve for me to trust him in those ways. And so, yeah, those 3.5 years were horrible, torture, like awful. But in 2018, the summer, I think, um, somebody said, I forget, I went to a test or I saw, oh no, I thought, I remember getting up one day and I was like, oh, I don't feel good. So I'm like, Dad, I need to go to the hospital. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, we got to go to the hospital. I'm like, he's like, okay. So my dad was visiting from Calgary. He takes me to the emergency room, and I had like the most intense panic attack I had had yet. So I was basically like, it's so hard to describe. It felt like, when your foot goes to sleep,
Yes.
that feeling of tingling and stuff.
Yeah.
It was like that, but over my entire body, and it was like crawling up my face into my, like, I can't, it's like the craziest symptoms that, because so often with panic attacks, it's different for different people.
Right.
But I was lying on the emergency room and I felt this crawling up my face. I'm like, okay, am I dying? Is this it? Is this a wrap? And I like told my dad, tell Fia that I love her. And, if this is it, I love you guys. I'll see you guys soon. Like, and I'll see you guys in heaven or something. I said something like that.
Yeah.
And I was just like crying. I didn't know what was happening. And then they gave me some super heavy duty, like sedatives or whatever. And that totally like calmed down my body. It was just stress overload looking back.
That's what it
And
sounds.
so
Oh.
that day was end of July, 2018. And then after that, they're like, somehow I got recommended to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, like I was saying before.
Yeah.
And um, he was basically, I told him like, hey, this is what's been going on. And he's like, oh, you have this. Like if you were reading a textbook, like your case would be right out of a textbook for this thing.
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. Like, but other doctors had told me, oh, this is what it is for sure. I'm like, okay, great. So I've had my hopes up before, but I'm like, sweet. So he told me about this, basically panic attacks, and you have like a fear of going outside or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm gonna die. Wouldn't you? Like, I'd be scared too. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I've never had a panic attack in my life. I've never been scared of really anything in my life. And all of a sudden I start feeling this way and I'm like, yeah. this is, this is new. Um, I wouldn't want to leave my house either. So, so basically he explained this and he's like, okay, you can start on these antidepressant things or whatever, but I'm like super anti anything, um,
Drug use.
drug use, like, um, what do you call it? Like just the legal, what do you call those legal drugs? Like not opioids? No,
Like
just pharmaceuticals, just pharmaceutical drugs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just never like, I was never into it. And so I was like, okay, I took them for about like 4 or 5 months and I was just like, there's gotta be a better way
Yeah.
to try to like get out of this or retrain my brain or whatever it takes. And so I started looking into it. I read that book called Dare by forget his name.
Yeah.
Dare, he's a Scottish guy, basically, and I read his book and it was like look, I felt like I was reading a biography about myself. Like I was like crazy. And so he's basically like, yeah, you don't need any pharmaceuticals to retrain your brain. You don't need, obviously, check with your doctor, make sure there's not anything more going on. Like you don't have any heart problems or anything. Um, I probably had like 10 heart tests, scans, all sorts of stuff. So I knew my body was fine because every time I'd take a test, they'd be like, oh, yeah, you're good. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I feel like I'm going to die, but okay, thanks. So
Wow.
started reading this book called Dare, and then that's when the recovery started happening. So 2015, got smoked, got taken out at the knees, and then basically homebound, did nothing for like just trying to recover, tried everything for 3.5 years, found the psychiatrist or psychologist, found this book, and then just started retraining my brain from there, and then started getting better slowly and started. So what often happens when you get panic attacks is you kind of lose territory. So if I go to the grocery store and I get a panic attack and I'm like, oh, okay, I can't go to the grocery store anymore because I feel bad when I go there.
Mm.
And really that's what you have to retrain your brain. You have to like retake territory. So you got to like, you basically feel, you basically like have to fight a battle every time you go somewhere that you've had a panic attack. So I had one at the library, the dentist, the grocery store, and a couple other places. And so I started practicing gearing up to like retake that territory
Wow.
from my brain, basically. So like and during this time I got off the antidepressants or whatever, and because they weren't really doing much for me anyways. Um, and and so yeah, so I'd go and like gear myself up and then like walk into Superstore to get something and like literally start getting what happened for me anyways, it feel like an egg was cracked on my head and I get like these big hot flashes down my body and just super
Wow.
weird symptoms when I'd start feeling like I was going to get a panic attack or whatever. And so you basically, the premise of this book is you dissolve, like you recognize that it's just a shot of adrenaline when you're getting these things.
Yeah.
Then you accept it like, hey, come on in, basically. Like, hey, it's just adrenaline. There's nothing wrong with my body. I'm not dying. Then you re-engage with what you're doing. And then I forget what the E stands for, but basically you just keep going about your day. And so I'd practice that and have like these victories. So I was basically learning how to walk again and learning how to like just interact with society and do stuff again. And so now it's been,
Yeah.
wow.
Are you over these panic attacks, Joe? Like, are you like
No,
they don't?
no,
Oh, they
it's
still arise.
a little bit. It depends. If I get good sleeps, it's so much better. Like sleep is huge.
Right.
If I can get a good sleep, it's like a different, it's a different day. I'll live a different day. Um, I'll still get like symptoms and stuff, but I know how to handle it in my brain. Like I know how to dissipate it.
Right.
So it's good. Like when I encounter those moments, it's good to like just tell my brain, well, basically what's happening is, when you like, say for example, you go through an intersection with your car and you nearly miss getting smoked by a semi truck or something. And you're like shaking, your hands are sweaty, your heart's beating so fast,
Yeah.
you're almost dizzy a little bit from the adrenaline, And but you're not scared because you can associate where that feeling came from. You almost got hit by a truck.
Right.
So it's essentially that same feeling, but you don't know why it's happening or where it came from.
Right.
So just retraining my brain to tell my brain, like, you don't have to be scared of these feelings. It's just your brain thinks, because it's been overworked for so long, it thinks it's in danger,
Mm.
but it's not. So it's kind of like, yeah, if you're getting chased, if you're a caveman or whatever, getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, like, yeah, you want that fight or flight response. This is good,
Yeah.
like, that's great. But if you're not, you want to retrain your brain to say, yeah, you're not getting chased by a tiger. You're not in any danger. And you're basically having to like retake your brain in a way, the subconscious of your brain. It sounds kind of hokey to say, but it's like,
So you're literally just talking to yourself the whole time, to your subconscious is what you're saying. You're talking to your old self and training your old brain pretty much.
essentially, yeah, you're telling yourself like, hey, and you're like, it's weird. In the book, it says to welcome in these feelings. So it's basically, so one of the symptoms was my neck would start to feel really tight.
Mm.
I thought I was going to like asphyxiate and I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And I would basically, so part of the book says you're supposed to tell these symptoms to basically like do their worst. So you're almost like want to get in a fight with these symptoms. Like, let's go. Like, if you're going to choke me out, let's do it. Like, do it. You're almost talking to yourself in your mind, because you're like, I have stuff to do today. I have work to do. I got a life to live. If you're going to choke me out, like, do it.
Wow.
You're almost talking to these symptoms, if that makes any sense. Or if my heart would get beating super fast, it's like, hey, if I'm gonna have a heart attack, like, let's go. Like, I'm not fearful of having a heart attack, and like, if this is what's gonna happen, let's go. If not, let me go about my day. Like, I'm gonna go about my day. I'm gonna go golfing. I'm gonna go on the boat. I'm gonna go for a walk in the woods or whatever.
You're welcoming the pain and the fear. That's what
Yeah. Have you ever, there's this one cartoon that really, as an animator cartoon, I gotta no, there's this really good one. Did you ever see the Disney movie Fantasia?
No, I have heard about it though. I haven't.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, their lesser one. It's kind of weird. I wouldn't. It's whatever. But there's a scene in there that Mickey Mouse is coming down the castle steps, and there's a torch on the wall of this castle stairwell, and you see on the wall this huge shadow of a monster coming down the steps.
Okay.
And I forget who was being scared, but it was like, this shadow's so scary. But then Mickey Mouse comes around the corner,
Okay.
and then the character's like, oh, that's no big deal at all. Like, whatever. It's just Mickey Mouse. He's nothing. And I use that illustration for how these panic attacks are. It's a shadow.
Mm.
The actual monster of it isn't, it has no bite. It's all bark, essentially.
Right.
Like, once you know your body's healthy, you can say, oh, it's just a shadow, like, whatever,
That just makes me believe like how powerful our brains are.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty incredible though. Like, and especially like, I think for a person like you, like the way that you're describing it, you must have overworked yourself past the point of exhaustion, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like that sounds like that sounds like you were living three lives in one.
It was bad news bears for sure. I was like doing probably 60, 70-hour weeks at work. And then we were pretty heavily involved with our church. So I was leading uh, uh, the youth group and doing all these extracurricular things. And then this is like, we had our first kid.
Wow.
So if you can, yeah, just like, as you take on more stuff, just get good at saying no.
I like that, man. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, that it just comes back to how important, mental health is, man, and taking
Yeah.
care of your brain, taking care of yourself, man, because there's a lot of people that are depending on you, especially being a family.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you were saying, you said it was part of your story a little bit. Can you share like what you said? You had some mental health stuff, or?
Yeah, man. Well, when I was going through the point where I lost my stepfather in a car accident, being one of the
Mm.
most like traumatic experiences for my family and I, like I kind of like shut off, I kind of like went into a mode where I was just like, I don't want to be around anyone. I don't even know what I want to do with myself. I didn't really know which direction to go in life. And I think I was just froze. Um,
Mm,
and dealing with that, kind of like recognizing, being more self-aware of like what my body's doing and like what my mind is thinking, you know,
mm,
and that's when I started looking into ways to get healthier. Like it was hard for me to even put a smile on,
mhm,
so then I discovered like, what mental health was pretty much, and what mental strength was, and and then I started reading a lot, and I kind of eventually found practices. I think there's so many avenues that you can go down,
mhm,
whether it be, nutrition, meditation,
mhm,
affirmations. I started running, working out. There's so many different routes, um, to developing a healthy brain,
mhm,
and I'm still discovering these things,
mhm,
so, but at that certain point, I think when you're in it, when you're in this mode, and it's kind of like what you're saying too, like talking to yourself. I
mhm,
think self-talk is so important. We have our subconscious tells us these things that if we haven't played a sport before, and someone invites you out to come play, like baseball, for example. If you're telling yourself that, oh, I've never played, I'm not going to do that good, chances are you're not going to do that good. It's pretty easy math. But if you're talking to yourself like, this is a cool sport, okay, this is a challenge for me, I'm going to try my best, and maybe I will be good at it. You know what? No, I'm going to be good at it. Then the whole game switches.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So I think if you practice a good, healthy self talk to yourself, then chances are you're going to slowly progress to living a better life, man. And
mm,
I think it's one of the most important things that I preach in this whole. That's why I like doing these podcasts too, like talking to other people and discussing like ways to get better. Self
yeah,
talk is totally like number one on my list,
mm,
and it usually comes back to those old ways, those old habits that we developed way before that we don't even know. I'm still discovering new things that I was telling myself that I can't even believe I was telling myself. Like,
yeah. Oh, it's crazy, isn't it?
it is crazy, man. Like, and people don't really recognize that. It's and I think that's why people are stuck. So when I was in that point of depression, um, I was stuck because I just didn't know how to talk to myself. I
Mhm,
didn't know how to give myself enough confidence to open the door to step out of that comfort zone, or
mm,
to learn a new thing or a new skill, or to even let myself like laugh at a joke or something. I was really stuck, and I needed to walk through. It's like when you have these panic attacks, and you're talking to yourself. It's really just talking to that fear.
mhm,
Fear is such it can be so big, but it's really so small.
yeah,
It's really just, it's one thought. It's a millisecond of a thought. That's what fear is to me. It comes down to just saying, okay, this is what it is, and I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna deal with it. And it's very tough for a lot of people, and it's like it's a challenge that everyone goes through, and we're gonna deal with fear every day, man. It's just
yeah,
how you talk to that certain fear.
yeah,
You have to treat it like a person almost.
yeah, yeah,
It's
100%.
a very interesting thing, man.
Yeah.
But Joe, there is one thing. I know you got to go, and I know you got a busy day. But there is one question that I always like to ask people, man. And you dealing with with that 3-year span of what you're going through,
Mhm.
and kind of learning more about mental health. Like, what does mental health really mean to you in this point in time?
Hmm. I think for me, um, after going through the fire, it it has shaped how, yeah, it's just really shaped how I view God and how I view my life and how I view the hope that I have and how I view how I'm supposed to do this life, with the short amount of time that I have. Um, for me, like one of the things that I did for just kind of like, okay, talking to myself, because like if the end result of uh this trial is death, like what do I do with that? Like, how do I handle death? Because then it's like final. Like, how would God have me look at that? And um I think God used this trial of mental health for me to just really shape me and to continue to mold me to who he has me to be. I believe God has a very specific plan for each person's life, um, to advance His kingdom and His purposes in the world. And one of the verses, my dad used to be a pastor, and I'd asked him, like, Dad, like, what should I? He's like, memorize scripture. I was like, Dad, what should I do? Every time he's like, memorize scripture, go to Jesus, like, go learn more about who Jesus is, and um, that will give you the perspective you need to walk this fiery trial. And so one of the verses that I memorized, because I can't stand memorizing stuff. Like, I'm not a memorizer. I can't. I'm a verbal person. I don't like writing stuff down. But I was like, okay, I got nothing else to do. I'm just walking around. Like, when we first moved to Vernon, we moved to the Kalmalka Lake area. There was a house we were renting. They had a fire pit in the backyard. And all the kids would go to sleep, and I'd light a fire, and I'd just sit there and just like cry and try to memorize scripture and from the Bible. So one of them was Isaiah 41:10. It says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will help you. I will strengthen you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." And in the context of that, God was talking to the Israelites, I believe. And it was just like a horrible time for them. Like, they were going through some crazy stuff. But I think for me, basically to summarize, mental health is another thing that I think God has been calling me to lay down before Him and be like, hey, you are not in control. This life is not your own. um, when Jesus died for me, He bought me with a price. Like, I have been, you know, like, God loves me more than I could possibly imagine. And this life isn't about you. I'm writing a story in your life that you don't see the whole picture,
Mhm.
but going through this, I want you to learn how to trust me, even though you don't see why you had to go basically give up 4 years of your life and do nothing according to what you wanted to do, even though you had to basically give up all ability and everything that you held dear and that you thought gave you value as a person. My ability to earn income, my physical strength, my ability as a dad. Like, I couldn't go to like, church is a huge part of my life, and I couldn't go to church because I would have panic attacks for like so long.
Mhm.
And I think he used this struggle of mental health for me to teach me that to teach me that, what, this life is bigger than you. I have so much in store for you. I have such amazing things in store for you, that I want you to use this time to get to know me. Use this time of struggle and of pain, because you got nothing else. Like, literally everything was stripped from me. I had money was gone, health was gone, like, ability to interact with people was gone. I had, like, basically everything was taken from me. And at that point, I was like, well, what do I have left? And God was telling me, you know what, you have me, and that's everything. You have everything you could possibly need in me. Like, this is where I want you right now, and I'm doing something even though you can't understand it. um, this is where I want you, and your main thing that you need to do is just trust me. And so basically, that's how I see this mental health, this whole trial for me. Other people, it may be a trial of losing a loved one. Other people, it may be a trial of, you know health for like decades. Other people, it may be a job loss. It could be a relationship issue. And I think God uses each of these set of circumstances to refine us and to prepare our hearts to one day meet him, essentially. Um, and so I don't know if that makes sense, but for me, like that's kind of what mental health means to me. And because of Jesus, I have all the hope in the world. I have like, there's a verse in the Bible that says death has lost its sting, and I don't need to fear death anymore. And oh, it makes me emotional. It's like, oh, um, like, yeah, like going through this, I see uh, just how much, just how much, yeah,
No, it's all right, man. It's definitely
yeah, just how much God loves me. It's just, it's hard to fathom sometimes, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
no, Joe, that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
I'm so happy for you, man. And I'm so happy that you know you're doing so well, and you know
yeah,
you had to overcome that for a certain reason, man. That's the only way that you can look at it, and it's so good to see you're here, and it's a privilege to sit down and have this
yeah,
conversation with you, man.
yeah, totally. Thanks for letting me share. Thanks for letting me ramble. And it even feels good to just like, it just kind of like, I'm a verbal processor. And
Yeah,
so it's always good to talk about it. I really appreciate you doing that. You doing stuff like this. It's awesome. I think it's hugely needed.
thank you, man. Thank you, Joe. And you know, like um, I do this, you know, to learn more myself, and to learn about you know the people that I'm sitting down with, and to learn about mental health and how the brain works. But you know, I'm also doing this just for connection and community, you know. And I don't plan on leaving this community, and I'm just trying to raise more than awareness, raise kindness, raise joy,
Yeah, man.
raise so
Yeah.
many different things, man. And you definitely are doing that as well, man, just by sitting here talking. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for joining me, Joe. And I can't wait to get another round of golf in very quick.
I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome.
That
Thanks
was
for having me on.
well. Have a great morning, man,
Yeah.
and we will talk soon, man. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, bro.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks,
Okay,
Derek.
okay, have
Okay,
a good day, man. Bye bye.
talk soon.